Here in studio. So the Dolphins haven't won a playoff game since 2000. Ouch. Shout out to Jay Fiedler and company. Where do they stand going into this season right now in your mind?
I think this is a very interesting year down in South Beach. I think this is a year in transition when you look at all the upheaval that's been going on with the Miami Dolphins. 4 of their captains from last year aren't even on the roster this year. And I think when you look at the Miami Dolphins, particularly on the offensive side of the ball, considering that's Mike McDaniel's, forte, this is what I call, like empty calorie type of offense. They give you a lot of candy, a lot of eye candy, but ultimately at the end of the day, they don't do the things that are sustainable for long-term success in the National Football League. And so for me, can the Miami Dolphins get back to the basics, controlling the line of scrimmage, do all those type of things in order for them to have success moving forward?
All right, now the Dolphins win total is set at 8.5 right now, tied with the Patriots for second in the AFC East. And later on in the program, we'll talk about the Patriots. All right, from a franchise quarterback that is Tua to someone who thought he was the franchise guy. And that was Kirk Cousins just 16 months ago. How about getting $100 million guaranteed from the Falcons a few weeks after signing him, though? The front office surprising many by drafting Michael Penix Jr. in the first round. Speaking of Netflix's new series, a quarterback, Cousins had some regrets here. Listen to this.
At the time, it felt like I had been a little bit misled, or certainly if I had the information around free agency, it certainly would have affected my decision. I had no reason to leave Minnesota with how much we loved it there if both teams are going to be drafting a quarterback high. But I've also learned in 12 years in this league that you're not entitled to anything. It's all about being able to earn your spot and prove yourself.
And by the way, he did struggle, especially coming off that Achilles early on with the Falcons, and then, of course, replaced by Michael Penix Jr. in the second half of the season. When you look at this young man, and Michael Penix Jr., and the Falcons specifically, the second-year quarterback, what do you expect from them moving forward?
I mean, listen, this has the potential to be, a very explosive offense. We saw a small sample size of Michael Penix Jr. last year. The one thing you have to say, just watch him last year, he wasn't that accurate. The arm is live. He has one of the livest arms in the National Football League. But the one thing coming out of the University of Washington that he was known for was his accuracy. Now, when you look at this offense that the Atlanta Falcons have, they got one of the strongest, one of the best offensive lines in football. They got, Drake London outside the wide receiver, Darnell Mooney at wide receiver, and Kyle Pitts, and, by the way, Bijan Robinson at the running back position. They have a plethora of skill position players that's going to help this young man, and I expect Michael Penix Jr. to really take that next step forward in his second year.
And by the way, some of the guys you mentioned were all first-round draft picks.
Yes.
And what did the Falcons do this year? They completely focused on the defense, especially in the first round, so to kind of turn things around with Atlanta, because defense has been a big storyline. Raheem Morris has to turn that unit around. By the way, I mentioned the Patriots tease. He's not going to keep off the field like Pete Carroll and Mike Vrabel. In January of 2024, Carroll stepped down as head coach of the Seahawks after 14 seasons. A year later, the 73-year-old is back on the sidelines with the silver and black, the Raiders. Vrabel, by the way, was fired by the Titans after a 6-11 season in 2023. After a year off, he got the call to lead the team where he was a star as a player, the Patriots. Here's Adam Schefter.
Not that the NFL ever needs any more storylines, but this season it has added ones. Head coaches who already have made history are now about to make more. After spending a year away from the NFL and as a professor at USC, Pete Carroll is back on the sidelines teaching everyone a different lesson. Age doesn't come with limits.
These guys have really been accepting to a little bit of the craziness that we're all about.
On opening day this season, September 7th, Carroll will be 73 years and 357 days old, allowing him to pass Romeo Crennel as the oldest head coach in NFL history.
Yes! Woo! We got it!
Carroll now will be able to add that distinction to becoming the only head coach to lead multiple franchises with playoff win in his first season with the franchise. He did it with the Patriots in 1997, the Seahawks in 2010, and now will aim to do the same with the Raiders in 2025.
It's about stability. It's about something that's proven.
The man has literally written books on leadership. He is a culture guy. He's a player's coach.
They're bringing the trophy home. Your Seahawks, Super Bowl 48 champions.
And speaking of coaching history, Mike Vrabel will become the first person ever to win 3 Super Bowls as a player with one franchise, only to become a head coach on the same team.
Back to throw, Brady fires, end zone, caught, touchdown, Mike Vrabel.
Vrabel takes over a Patriots team that has gone 4-13 in each of the past 2 seasons and is poised to be one of the most improved teams in the NFL.
Somebody asked me, are you worried about what went wrong last year? Why the would I care about what happened last year?
They'll be better, just as the Raiders will be better, because Carroll and Vrabel are back in charge. And just as teams usually are better when Carroll and Vrabel are patrolling the sidelines, so is the NFL.
Super Bowl champ Damian Woody has promised back with us with much more and some familiar faces in new places here. Let's talk about your former teammate, Mike Vrabel, coming back to New England. Definitely a different vibe here in New England considering what we saw last year. Now you have Drake May going to his sophomore year. It felt like they added a lot of weapons. How do you view the Patriots now in the AFC East?
I'm bullish on the Patriots this year. Yeah, listen, they added a ton, particularly on the offensive side of the football. Obviously, along the offensive line, which was a real weak point for this Patriots team. Obviously drafted Will Campbell number 4 and Morgan Moses to shore up the right tackle spot. So I think the offensive line is secure. We know they added Stephon Diggs. Coming back off that ACL, he should add a totally different element to this passing game for the Patriots. But I think their biggest acquisition was offensive coordinator Josh McDaniels, getting him back in the fold to help out a young rising quarterback in Drake May. And I think when you add it all up, I think this Patriots team is going to vie for the playoffs this year.
To your point, look at McDaniels' success and his track record as an offensive coordinator with quarterbacks. A lot of success here. All right, Patriots, by the way, they open up the season against the Raiders at home, where we're going to see Pete Carroll making his Raiders head coaching debut. In the offseason, they add Geno Smith. They draft Ashton Genty. How do you view the Raiders now with Pete Carroll running things?
Culture builder. That's what Pete Carroll is. Yeah. I saw it firsthand when I was drafted by Pete Carroll with the Patriots back in the day with the Seattle Seahawks. He turned around that organization, and that's what he's tasked with doing here again with the Las Vegas Raiders. I mean, listen, I always said Pete Carroll is the youngest, oldest coach I've ever been around. Yeah. But the one thing about Pete Carroll is all about competition and it's all about culture. So he brought in, traded for Geno Smith, guy he was familiar with, guy who he helped resurrect his career out with the Seattle Seahawks. They got a bunch of weapons now, but I think it's laying the foundation. I think this is a foundational year for the Las Vegas Raiders, because look at the division that they're in.
Yeah,
you talk about Kansas. It's tough sledding. You got Kansas City. Denver is going to be much improved. The Los Angeles Chargers are going to be much improved. So I think starting out, for the Las Vegas Raiders, they're in a much better position with Pete Carroll at the helm.
And by the way, you have Ashton Genty, maybe the best player where you could plug and play from the draft, immediately see an impact in week 1. The Raiders averaged under 80 rushing yards per game last year, the fewest by any team over the last 2 seasons. D. Wood, appreciate it.
And 9. Right from the grass court to the gridiron, Dak Prescott kicked off his yearly youth football camp in Southlake, Texas today. He took some time to speak with the media to update his health and discuss new teammate George Pickens. The Cowboys report to training camp. Pickens and all, July 20th. Todd Archer has more.
Since the Cowboys acquired George Pickens, Dak Prescott has been excited. And that excitement only grew last month when the quarterback and skill players got together in Georgia for some on and off field work. Pickens went so far as to recall some of Prescott's days at Mississippi State, which showed the quarterback that his newest receiver was a, quote, football guy. As for their on-field work, Prescott doesn't believe it will take long for him and Pickens to get on the same page.
He'll turn on that guy's tape. He's getting separation. He's got separation even when he's not getting the ball at times. And hell, when he doesn't have separation, he's still making the catches. That it's not going to be hard. For me, it's about getting that ball near that guy and letting him go beat George Pickens. And he'll turn on the tape. He's ready to do it.
When the Cowboys report to Oxnard, California on July 20th for the start of training camp, the Prescott to Pickens combo won't have to ease into anything. Prescott said he'll be a full go for the training camp practices, and he'll sometime soon here meet with the doctors to get his surgically repaired hamstring looked at one more time. But Prescott said he's healthy and ready for everything. With the Cowboys, Todd Archer, ESPN.
Thank you, Todd. As you see, our NFL analyst Damian Woody in the house here. Damian, good to see you in the offseason. A healthy Dak, CeeDee Lamb, we know what he is. Now they bring in George Pickens. So I'm curious if you think this Cowboys offense is capable of getting them back to the playoffs this year.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now you bring in a guy like George Pickens, who's a professional wide receiver. He's a big wide receiver that plays big. When he's open, he's open. When he's not open, he's still open. Okay, and I think also where George Pickens is going to help this offense is in the red zone. Yeah. Okay, when you got a big body wide receiver that you're able to throw the ball up to, and he can come down and make those contested catches. That's going to be big for this Dallas Cowboys offense, because when you think about the Cowboys, one thing they were bad at last year, obviously, red zone offense, but also running the football. We don't know who's the running back going to be in Dallas, but if you have a big time wide receiver on the outside who makes contested catches on the outside, that's only going to help improve that aspect of their game.
Yeah, they seem like they're built to throw the ball about 700 times this year.
Yeah, that could happen.
He's got a good O-line in front of him. We know they invested a lot there, by the way, at ESPN Bet. 3,650.5 passing yards is the prop for Dak. He's gone over that in 5 of his 9 seasons in Dallas. Now, speaking of QBs, Netflix has the second season of their quarterback series now live. So Joe Burrow, one of the QBs featured there, had this bite nerding out about fossils. Check this out.
Okay.
We went to the Natural History Museum. They took us behind the scenes and showed us some really cool stuff. It's like a library of fossils that they don't show everybody else. It was like you go to the shoe store and they're like, maybe we have it in the back, and it was like all the fossils back there. It was pretty sick. Why were fossils on my mind? I don't know, because they're cool. When aren't fossils on your mind? They go back millions of years. That's sick.
Now I kind of feel gypped when I was at the Field Museum.
I need to go check that out.
They're saving fossils for the elite like Joe Burrow. Here's why we ran that bite. Joe Burrow is the rock of this Bengals team. Some wordplay there, but they're coming off a disappointing season. They missed out on the playoffs. So what needs to happen for Burrow to get his team back over the hump and into the postseason?
Yeah, well, we saw the Bengals waste an all-time season by Joe Burrow last year, and primarily it was because of the defense. The defense absolutely stunk up the joint, and now they're embroiled in this contract dispute with Trey Hendrickson, one of the best pass rushers you have in the National Football League, a guy who's had, over the last 2 seasons, 35 sacks, which leads the National Football League. And so if you're the Bengals, you went out, you paid Jamar Chase, you went out, you paid T. Higgins. Well, guess what? New defensive coordinator Al Golden would like his star pass rusher to get paid. So Bengals, don't go back to bangling again. We've seen that for many a year. Let's keep going. Let's keep the momentum going. Go ahead and pay Trey Hendrickson and give yourself an opportunity to be respectable on the defensive side of football.
Yeah, you see those numbers right there with Trey Hendrickson.
With him.
They were a poor defense last year. Remove that, and you could be looking at a lot of third.